Hey, what's up, friends and family? So welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Herbs. One of the things about me, if I get a little personal here, is I don't have any kids. My reptiles are my kids, my pets are my kids, right? I'm one of those. But a lot of my friends, I'm at that age where a lot of folks have kids, and people aren't so young anymore. It's starting in their 30s. So here we are, and it's not uncommon that a friend reaches out to me and asks, oh, I see you have such and such species. See you have that. Is that a good pet snake for my kid? And there's a lot of different ways I can answer that. Most of the time, I say yes, because I want people to have pet snakes, knowing full well that, listen, parents, I'm talking to you. A snake for your kid is really your snake, because until that kid is 18, you're ultimately responsible for it. So that's something you need to know up front. And I have some that I think are excellent snakes for kids, and I'll get into those. But one of my favorite snakes, in case you can't tell the answer, is the Brazilian Rainbow Boa. And my friends ask me, is that a good snake for children? And the short answer is it can be. Depends on how old of a kid we're talking about and what their experience with snakes is and what your commitment is willing to be too. That's a big part of it, right? Again, like I said, till that kid is 18, the snake is ultimately going to be your responsibility. So let's go over the pros and cons of the Brazilian Rainbow Boa as a pet snake for children. With all due credit and apologies to Clint's Reptiles, I've created my own ranking scale. But instead of a 1 to 5 scale, because this is a series about snakes for kids, I've given it a grade scale, and I've changed the questions a little bit. So we're going to judge this based on, will they survive an escape? Will they survive husbandry errors? Do they look good in the cage? Are they safe? And affordability. So 5 different categories. We'll go through some other pros and cons here too, but expect a ranking based on those 5 categories coming up in this video. Now let me get Harvey. So this is Harvey. He is my male Brazilian Rainbow Boa. He's the first Rainbow Boa I've bought, actually, and he's doing really well. He's about 5 years old at this point. So he's going to keep growing his whole life, but he's not going to get a whole lot bigger than that. God. So you notice that iridescence, and you could probably see there's dirt falling off of him. And that is going to be one of the #1 things that I'm going to be talking about with these snakes in terms of, probably in terms of cons, is the substrate. So in our first category, will they survive an escape? Brazilian Rainbow Boas, unfortunately, get a D. Now, that's because they have really strict husbandry requirements, which we're getting into later in this video. But these babies, especially these babies, need humidity at around 100%. And when they're this size, they're super, super easy to get out of little holes, little gaps in the lid, things that aren't closed properly. And they could be easy to miss under the substrate too. So unfortunately, these animals need high humidity, and unless your house has the 80 to 100% humidity, there's a good chance that they could desiccate if out of their enclosure for too long. So it's important that you have a good, secure cage for these pets. And not just the fact that they need substrate. All snakes need substrate. But Brazilian Rainbow Boas need really high humidity. So we're talking in the 80 to 100% range, and is big. Which brings us right into our second category, will they survive husbandry errors? Now in this category, they get a C. And going back to the same thing, humidity needs to be up, 80 to 100%. But also, one thing that commonly kills rainbow boas is actually too much heat. These snakes don't need temps over 85 degrees. Anything over 85, so once you're in those ball python ranges, you're going to start reaching fatal temps for snakes. And with these little babies, the neonates, they don't even like it really much above 80. So it doesn't have to be warm, and that's a critical error people make, as well as keeping the humidity too low. But they are boas. They're fairly hardy considering that. And once you get past the 6 months range, they really become a lot stronger animals to keep. So they do make fantastic pets, and they are somewhat hardy compared to some species, but they just don't compare to other animals that are really tough, like your corn snakes and your reticulated pythons. So for the question, will they survive husbandry errors? The Brazilian Rainbow Boa gets a grade of a C. So obviously the first thing you can tell about Brazilian Rainbow Boas, and it's one of the things that draw me to them, is they're incredibly good looking. I love these snakes. And I really hope that iridescence comes through on this camera. If not, I'm gonna have to put in some B-roll footage or something like that. Because these guys have just such a beautiful rainbow iridescence to them that make them one of the most beautiful snakes you could have in captivity. And if you look at the size of the snake, he's not particularly big. So I put that on a pro, okay? Pro, he's not too big. However, on the con, he's extremely strong. So see the way he's holding on to me? These guys are actually closely related to anacondas. That's why I call them super dwarf red anacondas. And he is incredibly strong. He's gripping my very, very tightly, just to hold on. Now, he is not actually nervous. When he gets nervous, he grips extremely tight. He's actually gripping a little bit tighter just the longer he's out here. But you see those slow tongue flicks going up and down? He's thinking at the moment. He's realizing he's not in any danger, but he is kind of abruptly woken up from the middle of his sleep. They sleep all day. So that's another con. These are highly nocturnal animals, so you don't see them very often. If you can tell, I don't know if you can tell, my hands are dirty. There's substrate all over the floor. They need damp substrate, and they love to burrow inside of it too. So a lot of times when you pick them up, they can be a little bit dirty.
Now we're into the next category. Do they look good in the cage? Listen, I'm going to let a few videos roll here so that you could see what these snakes look like. Their reds are absolutely incredible. Their color is bright, vibrant, and the rainforest cage looks beautiful. But I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to sugarcoat it or hide it. These snakes love to burrow. You rarely will see them in the daytime. I keep all my snakes with UV light, and they will bask about 1 or 2 days each shed cycle. And it's tough for me to pick down exactly when in the cycle they do it, but they'll do it for 1 or 2 days, somewhat exposed. Otherwise, you might see a tiny bit of them each day, unless you wake up in the middle of the night, because they start around 10 at night to 4 in the morning is when they're busy. So for are they looking good in the cage, I gave the Brazilian Rainbow Boas a B, because they're so beautiful, and the only thing keeping them from an A is that they like to hide a lot. But the cage can be really beautiful as well if you do a nice, beautiful rainforest setup.
Some of the good things about them is they are boas, and just like anacondas, they have a huge appetite, so they rarely miss food. If they're not feeding, it's a clear sign that your husbandry is not where it's supposed to be. It needs to be corrected. For the most part, these snakes eat anything you give them. Rats, mice, quail, chicks. I have one that eats reptilinks. I haven't tried it with him in a while. He has in the past, but he's also refused them. But they're incredibly easy to feed once they get confident. That's another thing too. As babies, they really are a shy snake. They're not like a lot of snakes that you could grab and desensitize. You could really stress them out. So you really have to limit your interactions with them. So that can be a con for small kids. But as I was saying with their grip, one of the issues that you can have if you're not careful is they can grab your fingers and bend them in an uncomfortable position, or worse, spraying them, especially small children. When I've had Harvey around my fingers before, they've certainly turned purple, crossed over each other when he's gripping, and been in some situations that I thought could end up becoming quite painful. Thankfully, they never did.
So this is the perfect opportunity to ask the next question. Are they safe? Brazilian Rainbow Boas, here you see one of my more active males, Ruben, who has gotten me at least more than 20 times. He's given me a bite. And the fact that I still have them and still handle them and still use them is a testament to how safe they are. Their teeth are teeny tiny pinpricks. While they can hit pretty hard if they think you're food, they're not super painful.
Definitely.
And as you can see, I was trying to hold him with one hand and film with the other, so he's all over the place. And this is about as difficult of a rainbow boa as you'll find in captivity. A wild caught is obviously going to be a little different.
Sorry to drop you,
but
buddy.
this is an example of a really tough to handle Brazilian rainbow boa, and he's not tough at all. They are strong enough to get around someone's neck, so you have to be careful. Definitely a kid, and they should have adult supervision when handling, especially an adult.
And the
got some size
babies
to 'em.
can be stressed out from overhandling as well, so please limit it
I
to,
dropped him there. I wasn't.
I'd say, twice a week for a
Wasn't looking,
baby.
and then the next thing I
But
thought,
realistically, the
he's
less
gonna
the
come
better.
bite
They
me.
don't love
He's
being
usually not
handled, so
too
let them
defensive,
slowly get used to your
but
presence,
he
and you'll do much better.
does
But
scare
are
pretty
they
easy,
safe?
like most
The
rainbow
Brazilian
boas.
Rainbow Boa gets a grade of B, because while some may be bitey, the bites are not that bad, and they're not super strong. Nothing that's going to overpower any adult or even a teenager. I think right around the age of 12 or 13, you're perfectly safe for one of these snakes. An adult male is strong enough to resist a rainbow boa squeeze. They could also get around both arms. When he gets this tight grip around both arms, he can get you tangled up. If he gets around your neck, just simply this constriction alone right here will make you black out. So don't keep Brazilian rainbow boas around your neck. But that tight squeeze might be a little bit too tight and unsafe for your smaller children. So I think once you're in the 11, 12, 13 range and starting to grow up a little bit, that's when you can handle a strength of this strength, a snake of this strength. Just check him out here a little. As you can see here too, he's not all over the place. When they're younger, they tend to be a little flighty and they want to get away. When they're older, they're a very calm, very mellow snake. So to some people that's a pro, to some people that's a con. But again, to me, I love just looking at them the way that they are. I love finding them in nature and just the wild type pattern. I don't need it to come in a lot of morphs. But these do come. They come in albino, they come in a hypo, a number of different striping and pattern morphs too, some of which are really impressive. Which brings us to our final category, affordability. For affordability, like I mentioned, there's a lot of morphs, and you can get some snakes that are $15,000 for Brazilian Rainbow Boas, but these are going to be your cutting-edge morphs that aren't very popular in the hobby, and that's because most of these morphs are pretty new. I shouldn't say popular, they're just not very prevalent in the hobby. You can get some combos, too, that are real expensive, and some hats, anywhere in the $5 to $10, possibly even more $1,000 than that. But for the most part, you could find a Brazilian Rainbow Boa for as low as $250, although that's getting more and more rare. They're usually around $300 for a baby Brazilian Rainbow Boa, with adults running up to about $1,000. And you'll pay more, like $500 for a really bright red one, and adult high reds can fetch a really pretty penny too. But really, for a snake that's under $500, I think that's a pretty fair deal on an animal. Some are much cheaper, but in terms of the exotic designer snake industry, $300 is really not that bad. So for the Brazilian Rainbow Boa, I give a grade of B for affordability. And so you could play that sort of genetics game with them as well. But honestly, many people think that this is one of the most beautiful reptiles on the planet. I like to always caveat it. I would say it's probably one of the most beautiful non-venomous reptiles, just because there's some beautiful venomous snakes that I think take the cake. But I can't disagree with people that think that this is one of the most gorgeous reptiles on the planet, because I'm one of them. Again, the biggest issue with a snake like this is the requirement for humidity. If you don't have that proper humidity, you could kill the rainbow boa. And it's not the same for all the snakes I keep. There's a few more that are a lot more resistant and resilient that I'll get into. So that's why I'm starting off my series with the Brazilian Rainbow Boas, because... Which brings us to a final GPA of 2.40, which is a C+. Not bad for an intermediate snake that needs a little parental guidance. Because as it is, I just think they're more of an intermediate level species and probably not the best pet snake for a kid. Unless you as the parents want to care for this and want your kids to grow up them, they're perfectly fine under adult supervision. As you can see here, not super defensive or aggressive at all, and generally mild-mannered. So if this is a snake you're interested in as a parent, by all means, kids will love these animals. Getting them out is awesome to see. I'll take them to my niece and nephew, at them and that sort of thing, and they just get a kick out of it. So Something worth considering. Hope this helps you make a better decision for the best pet snake for your kids.